I'm Dan Engling, and I am the Vice President of Safety and Industrial Health for KERAMIDA. Heat stress has been a problem for thousands of years, but we've never had the ability to form a consensus on what a federal heat stress standard should look like from OSHA or any other federal agency or administration. One of the reasons that we have struggled so much as an industry and really within the OSHA administration to develop a standard that governs heat stress effectively and efficiently and even feasibly is because OSHA dictates regulation for a wide variety of industries, and heat stress applies to all of them in one fashion or another. The issue is you're taking one rule and trying to apply it to so many different things. That rule really does have to only exist in the form of the basis points of the hazard. Once we get beyond that, we start getting into things like job rotation. Well, job rotation doesn't apply everywhere. Or we get into acclimatization. Well, acclimatization doesn't necessarily apply everywhere. We get into provision of controlled resources, things like water provision, cooled break area provision. That doesn't necessarily apply everywhere. However, a lot of other OSHA regulations also have elements that don't apply across the board. So we can look at this from a holistic standpoint, and we can take cues from how we've done other standards in the past and push it into this new standard. So if you saw our video last year about the impending OSHA standard, we said that it wasn't available yet. We didn't have a copy. Well, we do now. As of July of 2024, there is a hard copy you can read through of the proposed rule as it exists in present form. That may or may not be the form that ultimately becomes enforceable. Within the proposed rule, there are a number of different requirements that we haven't seen in previous rules, like a heat safety coordinator position. This is a person that every employer has to have on staff to physically monitor and communicate with people who are working in hot environments as defined by the standard. Those heat safety coordinators have to be a ratioed position too. So you can't have a heat safety coordinator who is responsible for more than 20 other people. So if you had 40 people working, you have to have at least 2 heat safety coordinators. So this becomes a challenge from a staffing perspective. It becomes a challenge from a communication perspective, depending on the type of work that you're doing, how far apart your workers are. Are they all together where you can verbally communicate with them? Or are you talking about digital communication? There's a lot of challenges with respect to that. That's probably one of the biggest challenges that we're going to see in industry if the rule in this form goes into enforceable status. Another big challenge is going to be, how do we monitor the heat stress of the environment that the worker is in? So the standard proposed rule gives us a couple of different options. It lets us use heat index as a standard way of measuring the level of heat stress that's applied to the individual in the environment, in the work environment. And the other one is something called wet bulb globe temperature, or WBGT. Wet bulb globe temperature is widely regarded as the more appropriate metric to use because it takes into consideration things like evaporative cooling effect on the skin. And we know that humans use that extensively in the form of sweat to bring heat out of the body. If we don't use wet bulb globe temperature, we're sort of assuming a few things about the environment. The challenge is that, we may have a pick and choose problem that pushes employers to go with the simpler option, which from an industrial hygiene perspective is the inferior option. The third in the top 3 lists of maybe the biggest challenges that we expect employers to face with this new proposed rule is facilitation of acclimatization. Acclimatization is something that is very important. We know this is very important. There's been a lot of research on acclimatization. Most employers are already implementing acclimatization periods where it's applicable, but this rule requires it for all new workers working in and above these heat thresholds. Where this becomes an issue is if you're working with temp workers, or if you're bringing employees from the union hall and you're constantly moving employees in and out of a job. We suspect that this is going to present a pretty significant challenge to employers that move in and out new employees on a regular basis because of the time period that's required for this mandatory acclimatization period. So there are at least 16 different unique requirements within this proposed rule. I only listed the top 3 that I think are going to be some of the more challenging ones. I would encourage you to read through the proposed rule and become familiar with what those requirements are. We don't have all the answers. This thing hasn't been live yet. There are going to be several things that we suspect will be challenged in court. following the implementation of this rule. But we can certainly help you put together the required HIPP program. We can help you facilitate implementation of some of these controls within your facility. We've already written programs for some of the biggest companies in the world, as well as small shops that are just local. So reach out and let's talk about how this may apply to you and how this may actually be an opportunity for real improvement of health and safety opportunity within your organization.